Is this book any good for urban ministry? I'm going to do a book review today about this book, and the way I'm going to do this is two questions. First one is, does it say anything unique? So there's lots of books out there and there's lots of books on preaching. Does this say anything unique? You don't want to spend your hard-earned cash reading something that you've already read in a whole bunch of other books. Second thing, does it help preaching in the urban context? When you're preaching in a context where you got all kinds of people, where different people from different backgrounds, different people with different abilities, academically, different educational backgrounds, different subcultures, all living together in the urban context, is this book helpful for that? That's what we're going to look at. First question, does this book have anything unique about it that hasn't been put in other preaching books? Yes, definitely, totally. Bryan Chapell has this thing called the FCF, right? The fallen condition focus, where he gets you to think about this particular Bible passage. How does it speak to our fallen condition? It's an amazing thing that just changed the way that I preach. Not only that, it's amazingly helpful for thinking about all the different people in your neighborhood. Like, what aspects of the fallen condition does this Bible passage speak to them? And then it can help you to craft your sermon so that you're really preaching to people's hearts. That's what I'd say that FCF massively helps with, is preaching to your heart. So when you hear preaching with a FCF basis, it hits you in your heart and it's deep, it convicts you. And then, of course, the only solution then is to find out, how can Christ help me? How can his word help me? And it's amazing. You get addicted to FCF preaching. Once you've heard it a bit, it's kind of hard to listen to preaching that doesn't have an FCF in it. It can seem kind of dry and kind of academic. So Bryan's contribution to preaching here is amazing. It is phenomenal. Just want to tell you a story, right? I've been preaching for a while, and someone come up to me one Sunday and said, "Duncan, I've always enjoyed your preaching, but lately it's been different. Lately it feels like you've been preaching to my heart." And I was like, oh, praise God. I'm doing this Bryan Chapell thing, this FCF thing. And I actually found this a big thing in this book that helped me massively with my preaching, that then went on to shape how I teach preaching on the urban ministry program. Also how I started approaching contextualization and all kinds of stuff. And it's to do with Bryan Chapell's FCF, which is the best thing about this book. Now, second question, is this good for urban ministry? I want to say a big yes, but also I want to say, you like most guys in urban ministry, you find you've got to tweak the resources that are already there, right? So Bryan's stuff is brilliant. The FCF stuff, personally, I had to develop that more on the urban ministry program so that we could use it more in the urban context. So you have to take his stuff and tweak it a bit to make work. And that's something that I think Bryan Chapell himself will be comfortable with. Same with anyone who teaches the Bible, hopefully, is going to say, look, this is my method, use it, get used to it, and then make your own method, make it work for you. I think what I didn't like so much in this was, in terms of the structure of a sermon, that stuff, and you can kind of notice in the beginning of this book, I've got loads of highlights. Like, I'm just highlighting it all the time. There's always highlights in here. And then when you get to the stuff about the structure, maybe I got some highlights there, but there ends up being less highlights. And the structure stuff, I wasn't feeling so much. In some ways, the structure, the techniques he gives, is what I would expect in a seminary. And Bryan Chapell used to teach at Covenant Seminary in America, so that makes sense. But you know, those sermons you hear people teach in seminary, preach in seminary, and then when they start off at a church, they just come out of seminary and they teach this certain way of preaching. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about, right? And there's a certain kind of preaching that's done in churches where it just seems very stiff and very much like a sermon. but doesn't sound anything like how any of the New Testament sermons sound at all. So it's its own kind of, there's become a certain subgenre, a subculture of preaching that is seen as, oh, this is very good, it's very theological and very biblical and glorifying God. But a lot of it is cultural trappings of the academy, very academic. I'm not feeling that stuff so much, to be honest. But in the urban context, certainly in London anyway, and in the UK, I would say the culture is more used to either hearing like stand-up comedians, or they're used to hearing like TED Talks, you know. So the structure stuff I didn't like so much, but that's me trying to be critical about this book. This is my favorite book on preaching. The FCF stuff is worth buying the book for FCF alone. But there's other nuggets in there. There's so many good nuggets in here, such good stuff that you will find. I would say if you're going to get one book on preaching, get this one. I'd also say if you've already done the my preaching webinars, or you did the urban ministry program years ago before we started doing webinars, and you learned how to preach that way with the FCF, it's still worth getting this book to go alongside it, because there's just nuggets in here, golden nuggets. It's really good. It will remind you about things you've already learned, and it will have some other stuff that I haven't taught people, some great stuff in here. I'm about to read this again, just for fun. I mean, I'm just going to read the highlighted bits, but that's what I highlight, so I can go back and just read the highlights and not go through the bits that I wasn't feeling so much. If you haven't done any of my modules in teaching the Bible, and you didn't want to do my modules for whatever reason, we've got one coming up in June, but you might not be too busy for that or might not want to do it, that's cool. I would say get this book and adapt your preaching style to a lot of stuff he says here. I would just say that bear in mind the style. You got to make sure your style fits the people that you're trying to reach. So a big thumbs up for me. Bryan Chapell really helped my preaching get better, and even now when I reread it, I'm relearning stuff that I forgot that he said, and I'm like, oh, this stuff is so good. So great book for urban ministry, but you do want to tweak it a bit, like with most resources. That's one of the problems we find in urban ministry, isn't it? That we're often having to tweak resources people are made to work in our context. But that's also why we do things like the urban ministry program. In June, we got webinars running in how to teach the Bible. So if you're interested in that, sign up for that. We'd love to see you there. Thanks for joining me today on the Urban Ministry Show. Hopefully we have more reviews of more resources and all kinds of other stuff. God bless.